This time. We'll probably will. All right. We are live. What's up, Melky?
Hello, Christ acceptors and faggots alike.
Just not the Christ deniers. We're not saying hi to those.
Yeah. We're going to do Sermon on the Mount today. But before we do, we should, I don't know, like maybe are you following Yoram Hazony? It is an interesting controversy.
I don't know if I am or not. I've been on my
secondary
Twitter account.
Here's what happens.
Tell me about him.
When you talk about this guy, like we have, the like almost like the chief of the Sanhedrin, Luke Ford, will show up and go like, have you even read his whole book? And I'm like, no, I haven't read his book because I know it's a psyop from the beginning. And so my thing is, like, he showed up about a year ago with this book called The Virtue of Nationalism. And there was like 1 minute where everybody was like, oh, finally, someone has said nationalism is okay. But then it was like, wait a minute, it's this small hat wearing Yoram Hazony Israeli guy. And I have a suspicion that he's not going to let us do it our way, And then that's like, then he, like last week, I guess he hosted this big, supposedly pro-nationalist conference. And he disinvited Peter Brimelow, famous like white nationalist, I guess, or white nationalist sympathizer, and that Patrick Casey guy who's sort of the same stripe. And it's like, I mean, I just think, like, this is my take, is that and it's always like the 80-20 thing. It's like 80% of them are sort of supportive of all of the deracinating, like, all basically liberalism for the 20th century. So like you've got mostly Jews. I mean, Jews were the socialists and communists that pushed all of the nonsense in the 60s and kind of, subverted traditional America and really like wrecked the ethnogenesis that was happening among white people in the 20th century. We were finally getting to where like white American was an ethnos, it was a people. And then right on the cusp of that, they start pushing their, Adorno, Boaz, like race isn't real, everyone is welcome, open the borders, anal sex is normal, like the whole thing. And that worked. Like somehow and you could say, oh, well, like American whites shouldn't have sold their birthright and they should have rejected it. But it's like, it's not an easy program to reject. And what I've been thinking this morning is that, now all of a sudden, like literally starting, I mean, you could say in 2003 among the very woke, but like honestly, publicly, not until 2015 or something have most of these Jews started to turn to the idea that, oh, no, now nationalism is good and like working for your national interest is reasonable and you can keep out the, the strangers or the foreigners or whatever. So it's like basically their program ruined our countries. And now that program, which I call Jewish idealism, is like coming for them. And now they're like, oh no, it's bad. Like you have to keep the foreigner out and the pause out, and you have to encourage in-group marriage and nationalism, basically. So it's like, no, let's finish the project of Jewish idealism. Let's open Jewish borders and let's encourage them to be gay and welcome all the races. Like, I mean, let's just have them take their own medicine finally, That's my
how do you push that on?
You call them racists. You call them racists, like loudly and in public. You join BDS and talk about Palestinian suffering endlessly, just like they did to us about black people and civil rights and stuff. Palestinian rights are civil rights. That's how I do it. Because it's vengeance I'm talking about. It's like nonviolent vengeance, because I'm sick of their like bait and switch, like changing the rules. This, by the way, sorry to go off like this. I'm on kind of coffee still, I guess.
No, I like it.
It's like a rejection. Remember, like everyone knows this thing about Logos rising. And like, this is my understanding of this, is that I think I said this to you last time or someone last week, that like Logos was this, like Logos kind of means nature. It means reality. Mm-hmm. It means like the order of actually existing things. And there was this strife between Jews and Gentiles that arose as soon as Jews became a people, basically. And it happened for 1,000 years. And there was the conflict with Greece and the conflict with Rome and the conflict with Egypt and Babylon, and it just kept happening and happening. And so basically some genius named Jesus and then Paul like understood that we're going to have like perennial strife and war if we don't figure out a new order of things. And so they introduced the new logos, which is just like, we're all going to hit reset, let go of our old tribal identities and start again. We're all, what was that? Ephesians 2:11-16 stuff we were talking about last week. Mm-hmm. And the Jews rejected it. That's the point. They rejected the logos. And like, here we are again in 2019. They themselves went around the world preaching this pseudo logos of like deracinating, anti-tribal, like anti-racist, love and acceptance, world Weimar Republic. And then, just as it started to come for them, they want to reject that logos. So it just like they're always carving out a little exception for themselves. And I'm saying, like, let's just actually make them finish it one of these times, like swallow your own pill. So that's all I have about it. It just makes you mad though.
Yeah. Well, in like the Jews, like Duvid, they want it, right? Like they would love to have open borders in Israel, right?
Yeah, but like, here's the thing about that is Duvid never wins. Like, so they always go, I mean, he wins in America. So Duvid never wins in Israel. Duvid always wins in America. So like American Jews are always 80-20 in favor of deracinating policies. And they can say like, oh, like, like Jews are overrepresented even at American Renaissance conferences or something, or even in like reactionary right-wing circles. Yeah, but they never win. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, in America, like liberalism always wins. But then somehow in Israel, it's the based reactionary right-wing Jews who win. Although
I guess Duvid would say, yeah. That's from what I understand. Like Duvid says things like, I guess like people like Netanyahu are pushing for the closed borders, and they're shipping the Filipino workers that they imported. They're shipping them back to the Philippines with their kids because they don't want, they don't want.
And like this is the thing is, it's like they're making us choose, right? You can say, well, that's based. Good job, Israel. That's nationalism. Good job. Like, kick out the foreigner, do your own. But I'm tired of it because they switched the whole sort of what do you call those? Like the algorithm only when it's in their favor. So I'm very tempted to just go, wow, that sounds really racist, Israel. Mm-hmm. Like how dare you, Because
it's extremely racist, right?
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. I guess by their own definition, it's racist. Right.
But now all of a sudden they want to be like, well, it's kind of okay to be racist. And there's like, and so you get
it's like that Charlie Kirk video, right? Where he's like,
amazing.
America is not a shit, it's only the people or some shit. Yeah. But he's like, but Israel is different, right? Because that is religious. Like, fuck you, Charlie Kirk. Like, go suck a fat one.
And that's exactly what I mean by logos rejecting. Like, logos is by its nature singular. You don't divide like reality into little sections and like and believe that there are different logics or different orders for each of these sections. Like, reality is reality. And so you can't say like reality is one thing for Jews and one thing for everyone else. I mean, again, although as I tweeted yesterday, sure you can, you just have to reject logos, meaning you just have to like basically like embrace absurdity and inconsistency and carve out a special exception for yourself, which now is what they're doing. And it's like, it's kind of infuriating to a person who's trying to reason, because, reason has this like transcendent quality to it. And they keep dragging us into the mud of inconsistency and exceptions and, whatever. But I think the logos really is like transcendent. It's eternal and real. So fuck them.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah, that is a good idea. Like to call them out, like call them racist and really push for push for the gay disco in Israel. Like
Right.
I'm ready for the gay disco to break out.
Well,
in, like,
and
Tel Aviv
honestly,
and
like
Jerusalem.
it kind of already is, and they're very worried about this, and this is why it feels like they're panicking. This is why, like,
Let's ramp it up.
yeah,
Let's go. Full
that's
steam
what I
ahead.
say. Like, good.
Don't
In
give
fact,
up.
like, we should be praising whenever you see a story about like Gay Week in Tel Aviv. We should be like, wow, that's great
Yes,
moral
bitches.
leadership. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
great job. Look
Yeah.
at how progressive Israel is. That's the only way to do this. I think we want to complete the project.
It's like step one.
Yeah.
Step one, make being gay okay. And step two, I'm like it's only good once the tranny kids come in.
Yeah.
You know, like once they do that, now they're getting more on board.
Yeah,
so.
we should like public library, like there should be gay transsexual rabbis, like you know, we should start pointing out the racism that's in the Torah so that they can excise it and no longer, you know, like just they basically should have hate warnings. I mean, we should notify the ADL basically that like Israel is an outlier when it comes to hate. Like they are leading the world in hate and we need to crack down on it. There needs to be like a Christian Defense League or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Logos Defense League.
Yeah. We should like have some type of Christian Defense League, the CDL. Yeah, we should make the CDL.
Yeah.
And then just send people over to the synagogues and preach Christ to them. They need Christ, and I think we should. And I want to know, like, how come Israel seems to be one of the only countries besides like North Korea where you can't go and try to plant churches?
No, they don't. They're anti-Christians. I mean, because yeah.
Which means they're anti-God and anti-Logos, so.
And hateful. And like
very
basically
hateful.
like just hateful people. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want them to do better.
Yeah. I want them to just come to Christ. Like they can all be saved. Just
Let's talk about Jesus. Sermon on the Mount, which is where Jesus first invites them to get it. And this is something that took place in Judea. His audience, almost entirely Jews at the time, and they had like started to kind of like they were living in this like kind of messianic expectation age. There were others who like claimed messianic status, and there were also like political revolutionary leaders. So that it was this time that would have felt like, you know, the 1960s or Paris in the 1840s or whatever. There's like people talking, things are going to happen. And so they start to follow him around. He's got a kind of credibility. And Sermon on the Mount, a bunch of crowds show up. He goes up on the mountain. You've probably seen this depicted in one movie or another. He sits down and his disciples come to him. As far as I know, all of his original disciples were Jewish.
Well, hold on, back up a little bit. So Sermon on the Mount, of course, is Matthew 5, 6, and 7. But before that, in chapter 4, when he finds like what is it, Peter and what's his brother? Andrew, and they're fishing, and he comes over and like basically says, "Follow me." I still want to know, like, what the hell did he say to them to make them like leave their job? Like that was their job as fishermen, so they left their job to follow this guy.
Yeah,
so he must have had like a huge like impact on them for them to just pick up everything and just leave and just follow this stranger.
Yeah,
you know,
this is a great question because it requires that midrashic, like that thing where you slow down and you go like, well, what actually happened here? How is this psychologically realistic? Is this a fairy tale? And I don't think so. I think there must have been something, probably both. I mean, certainly about him, like they must have recognized something in his face. Although I don't think it doesn't say that he, you know, like threw a thunderbolt. Like there was no visible miracle, and later on he talks to what's his name, Peter, and he says, "Good job, Peter, like you didn't recognize me by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven." So it's like the recognition is given not because he's 9 feet tall or glowing or floating or doing miracles. I mean, I do think he probably looked, like there are, physiognomy. He probably looked like a trustworthy person. He didn't have like the phony the garment stuff that the Pharisees wore. Like, I don't know. He must have spoken. You know how sometimes you just hear someone speak and they sound like a true person.
Yeah, I bet his eyes were like awake.
Lit, yeah.
He was like, "Listen, brothers, follow me.
Yes.
We're about to go flip some fucking tables."
Exactly. But there also, I think, must have been something in those fishermen that was so like near breaking that they were ready to leave already anyway.
Yeah. They needed like some revolutionary person, right?
They were like, you know what? Like, because you can imagine so Judea is already a kind of marginalized. I mean, it's on the edge of the Roman Empire. It's kind of a desert. Like it was divided into, basically like the rabbis and everybody else. And the temple was all gold. Like my sense is that these fishermen were not rich guys, certainly. And so they must have had a sense that like, here we go. Every day we're out there fishing in the Sea of Galilee. We're barely bringing in any fish. We're certainly not rich. It's like, what are we doing? And so when he says, come with us, these are probably incels. They're not married. They don't have jobs that are good. They're like, yeah, fuck it. Let's go see what's going on with this guy.
Yeah. And then he gets two more. And like they're with their dad and they leave their dad and their boat and their nets and their catch and just fucking go. So that's like 4 people. He just said, hey, come on, we're going to go do this shit. And they went. Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Fishers of men.
Fishers of men.
I love that metaphor.
Oh, yeah. Hold on. Which part was that? What verse was that?
Matthew 4, like
that is amazing.
19, 4:19. He said to them,
that's it. Yeah.
Follow me and I will make you fishers of men.
Fishers of men. Dude, we should go into that, like what that kind of means.
Well, imagine what they're doing, right? They're out there on the sea. It says right after that, immediately they left their nets and followed him. So the way they would fish back then would be to throw those big nets with stones on the edge and then pull up whatever they got. So I think what do you go fishing sometimes? I've seen your pictures of fish. Like, don't you, if you fish enough, I used to fish all the time. You get this, you can acquire fish mind a little bit. Like you kind of know what a good spot for a fish is. Like how a bass likes the shade at midday and like the shelter. Like if there's if you see like a log sticking out of the water or something, like throw your lure under there. There's probably a bass under there. They don't love open, deep, clear water. You can't just throw a lure out there.
Yeah, and low pressure, because when it's like really humid outside, that causes like everything at the bottom of the water to kind of float up. So fish are swimming around looking for food that way.
Perfect. So you have to like read the conditions of of reality, basically.
Right.
And so I think as an analogy, it's perfect. In order to catch a fish, you have to kind of think like a fish, and you have to offer the fish what the fish wants at some level. But then like embedded in the bait or the lure, there's this hook. And so it's like, to fish men, you're not
going to catch them all. Like some are.
Oh, true. Yeah. But you're going to have to think like a normie is what I'm saying, or like an unconverted person. In order, so you're going to have to use parables that they'll understand. You can't just throw a hook out there. You have to throw a hook out there with a worm on it because they want a worm, that's probably the best I can do with that analogy.
And sometimes you have to use like the shiny, flashy spinner bait to get them in.
Yeah, exactly.
But then once you got them, you got them.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you a catch and release person?
Yeah, I used to do that all the time. Isn't it fun to think? I used to think about like what it would be like to be a fish, living your whole life basically underwater as a fish, eating minnows, and then one day you get hooked in the lip and like pulled out of the water, and you're like, I can't breathe. You're looking face to face with this giant creature. It's like, and then they just let you go. It's very much the Plato's Cave thing. Like you go back there into the water and you're telling your fellow fish. Or, I mean, okay, you're not telling them, but like, this happened, but it's inconceivable. It's like, how could what happened just have happened? It makes no sense. I'm still alive. I'm not harmed, but there's a whole other world that exists that none of us know about
Mm-hmm.
until it happens to you. And I do think that's like kind of a perfect analogy for this kind of like born again thing that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fishers of men. Damn, I love that.
That's a good
That's
one.
really good, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so Sermon on the Mount begins with basically the Beatitudes, all of those almost like Taoist reversals. It's been a while since I've looked at these one by one. Are they? I mean, the most interesting one to me is the one that says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," because I think it's in the other version of this, which is in what, Luke, or Luke? Is it Luke? The other version of Sermon or the
Can't remember.
Beatitude, and it doesn't say spirit; it just says, "Blessed are the poor," as opposed to the poor in spirit.
Yeah. Wonder what the KJV says.
Well, but it's different in the two different gospels, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Let me see.
I know, I'm
Beatitudes.
looking for it now. Let me see here.
Yeah, in Luke, it's 6:20
I'm way
or
behind.
so. So, I mean, that one's interesting to me.
Oh yeah.
Is that it?
Mm-hmm. Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. In Luke, what is this?
Yeah.
6. Yeah. Luke.
So it's a little different, and it's like it makes a difference because when I think of poor in spirit, I don't necessarily think of financial poverty.
Right. Yeah. That's like
And
they're missing something in spirit. Like something's just not there. It's absent, basically.
And I actually like Matthew better for that reason, because it seems, because like there's like rich people or middle class people who are poor in spirit, who are suffering, psychologically or emotionally.
Yeah.
And that seems actually worse to me. Whereas I've seen very happy poor people, and it doesn't seem to bother them in some cases.
Yeah, it's like the sackcloth people they're
Yeah.
happy,
Sometimes, you're right. Sometimes they're doing great, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. I think that you like gun-toting militia people have to deal with this one. Like it does make you wonder. I think like the Christians never did run a war, right? Like they didn't really conquer Rome physically. They conquered it meekly. Basically, they gave it up. They left. They kind of walked away, and by their like renunciation and peace, somehow the empire came to them.
Yeah, I think so. Oh shoot, am I frozen?
No, you're good. No,
Okay.
I mean, I think you're right. Like and I'm not saying, I'm not doing the anti-Second Amendment thing. That's fine. The guns are fine, and the self-defense is fine. But I think I'm sort of joking. But I think like this isn't a violent revolution we're talking about. This is a very like meek, very low.
Weak. Yeah, it's like weak
style of. It's like physically weak and spiritually strong or something, probably, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Like based in spirit, and you just like, well, I don't know.
I think here it's pretty much like the spirit is weak because you have these fucking legalists, just judging everybody. And it's like, fuck, man, like we can't do anything. We have all these laws and rules we have to follow. It's like we're all fucked. Like nobody can you imagine? Like just imagine that for a second. You have all these rules that completely go against your human nature. And like just imagine how depressing that is. Like it really is Orwellian, isn't it? You have to sit there in your recliner while the TV screen and you don't want to move because it might see you.
Yeah.
Like it's that would be so depressing.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine. No wonder they were poor in spirit because it was fucking crushed with their 613 laws.
Right. Yeah. Maybe meek. I mean, Vox Day Respecter is saying that's not quite the same thing as weak, and that's fair, I guess. Maybe it's like small or like.
I think meek. I just think like a kind of a pathetic, I guess.
But like that's the path,
Mm-hmm.
Let me look up the definition of that exactly. Meek, easily imposed upon, submissive, quiet, gentle. I mean, yeah. Anyway, the point is that like they're the ones who are going to win, right? Like that, they're the ones who will inherit the kingdom of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Or the earth, it says. And then blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. That's another interesting one in verse 10. Because it's like, what would that look like? And of course, you have to deal with like what righteousness is.
Yeah, it's like somebody has righteousness, and of course, at this point in time, it was the Pharisees, right? So you have to go off what they believe to be righteous.
Probably, yeah.
Am I right there?
I think, although maybe Jesus had a different sense already of what righteousness was, like maybe it meant faith and not works as much. Although we're going to get to like verse 17 and 18, where he does seem to say to them, again, like the law and the prophets stand. So, yeah, we can do that one, I guess.
Then,
so like read 17 and 18 and 19 and 20.
Yeah, that whole paragraph there is really good. When Christ came to fulfill the law. So, all right, so verse 17. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly, I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of these, the least of these commandments, and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. He's just like, he's fucking trolling them. Like,
yeah,
you guys are never going to be, you're never going to basically fulfill the law. Like, you can't do it. It's humanly impossible.
Yeah, I mean, and this does drive people crazy. Like, this is the one that Mephistopheles' ghost is always telling me to deal with this because he doesn't like it because he sees it as Jesus saying, "Do the Jewish law." I guess my take on this would be that, like, it does say later on that Jesus came first for the Jews and like subsequently for the Gentiles, like that, or he even says only for the Jews, I think, or primarily, or something.
Yeah. That's what he said. In Matthew 15, 24. I was sent. It says, so this was the faith of the Canaanite woman. So that's when the Canaanite woman came to him and was like, "Hey, help me. I have a demon-possessed child." And then he answered and said, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." So that's his job. Like, he was there basically like, "Hey, you fucking Jews are like ruining shit. And I'm here to like wake you guys up, get you on the right path."
So like there is an argument to be made, and this is what Luke will say, and this is probably what like Kenny would have said, and I don't know what Duvid would say, but like the point for us is that Christianity doesn't stop at Jesus. It includes the rest of the New Testament, which includes Paul's revelation from Jesus. Like, I mean, in a way, you have to believe that that also happened, and that what Paul was shown or told or commanded is part of this like project. And so Jesus comes for the Jews and he tells them specifically, keep the law, you Jews, and then in verse 20, he's like, unless you're even more righteous than the scribes and Pharisees, you won't get into the kingdom of heaven. And so in that light, this whole sermon looks like Jesus talking to Jews, basically raising the bar, so that like if you look further down on the one about adultery, like verse 27 and 28, he says to them, hey, you Jews, you've heard it said, do not commit adultery, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So he's sort of trying to say to them, like, you guys are all like law keepers, like you're trying to technically, like you would go and get a hand job from some like Asian massage parlor and you would try to go, oh, that didn't count because that's a Gentile or something. Like you're keeping the law technically, but not in spirit. And so what he's saying is that doesn't count. That's not good enough. Like you have to be even more righteous than these Pharisees or else you're not getting in. In other words, the law can't save you unless you totally nail it. And none of you are doing that.
None of them can do it either.
None of them can do that. Right. And so like part of what happens then is that Paul shows up to try to basically like pronounce this new logos, which is they can't keep it. we, as it says in, like, what was that other verse? Like in Ephesians 2:11 and 12, like you Gentiles have been like separate from Christ or from God or from Logos. And so now we're going to like forge a new person. And this new person will be justified not based on the law or law keeping, but based on like faith in Jesus and solidarity and like unity in that faith. So like I think part of what Jesus was doing was to show the Jews that like none of you is saving yourself by like law keeping. It's not working, you know, you're not managing. I mean, I don't know, like maybe like what I always skip that section on anger. Maybe we should do that. 21 through 26.
Yes. Well, that one's important because like I automatically think so it's like the judgment, right? So basically what Christ was saying here, let's see, in verse 21, you have heard it said, sorry, I have it all marked up here. You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Awesome. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly, I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. So it's basically like settle your shit before you go before the Sanhedrin. And now instead of probably being able to work something out between you and whoever you're having a disagreement with, you leave it up to these other fucking people and just hope that they make the right decision, you know?
First, two things on this. The first is this does point the way to completely parallel and separate institutions, which is to say, like, don't take your like disputes to American courts of law. Like, don't do that anymore. Be separate from empire. Like, figure it out among yourselves, tribe, you know, fam, crew, whatever. Like, do it that way. And then the other thing about this is he does the same pattern, right? He goes, you have heard it said, he quoting one of the 10 commandments, you shall not murder. And so the Jews would walk around going like, well, I didn't commit a murder today again. Aren't I good and going to heaven? You know, this is the like Pharisaic attitude. Yeah. But Jesus again dials it up. Like he goes, but that's not good enough, you guys. Like contained in that commandment is basically the whole slippery slope that leads to murder. So if you're even pissed at a brother, you're basically in violation of that law. And so you're all in violation. Like that's what he's trying to do, because they're walking around feeling holy, and he's saying you're not holy. Like you got a long way to go, actually. These laws like track themselves up from the worst example to like, you know, anger in your heart or lust in your heart or those very first seeds of sin, and they're all guilty on those counts.
Yeah. And they can't, like, I can only imagine the tension that would build up, you know, like you're not able to talk something out with your neighbor about a disagreement or a little spat. So instead you have to go to the courts. And what if the courts do, like, obviously somebody's going to come out like pissed off because now you're leaving the decision to somebody else to make up for something that between you and another person. Like, what kind of tension is that going to build up? Like nothing ever gets, like settled basically between besides the court. And then it's like, well, you know, I used to watch Judge Judy. It's so funny, a little Jew lady, but you learn a lot, you know. It's you always see the judge will rule, and then the person that kind of gets the shit end of the stick is pissed, and then so now they leave the courthouse and they're all pissed off and probably have to pay money or you know. And what it's not really, I don't know. I don't think it would be good if that happens just all the time. Then you have just people just walking around pissed off all the time, and you know.
Yep. On divorce, the next section I think is interesting for a couple of reasons, where it's like, first of all, I mean, there was a provision in Jewish law for how to get divorced, and Jesus basically says, don't ever do that. And I think part of what he's seeing there is that like divorce is like it's an attempt to like reverse logos or something. Like it tears apart what wasn't meant to be torn apart. And so he basically says, don't ever do that. What the other interesting thing about it is that Christianity, and I don't really even think Judaism ever consciously or explicitly defined marriage. It's sort of just like, it seems to have been an even more ancient institution that they just took for granted at some level, you know?
Well,
Like it's not as if it says the thing about like, oh, marriage is between one man and one woman, and it's intended for the children and the, you know, et cetera. It doesn't do that anywhere. It just says like marry and have kids and all that stuff.
but I was just looking at what Deuteronomy says about divorce. When a man takes a wife and marries her, and if she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, and she departs out of his house. And if she goes and becomes another man's wife, and the latter man hates her and writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter man dies who took her to be his wife, then her former husband who sent her away may not take her again to be his wife after she has been defiled. For that is an abomination.
That does sound more like contractual. Vivian's in the chat saying, and less sacramental. Like, that is, the Christians do seem to have elevated marriage maybe to a sacrament, meaning it's supposed to be sacred. And you can kind of see that in what Jesus says there, maybe, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not like you can just write out a contract and then cancel it because you're you know what I mean?
It's kind of bizarre, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
well, look, we can do it because it's on paper.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they had a kind of property based sense of marriage in the old days, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. So, what else about oaths?
Yeah, there's a let's see here. You shall not
swear. I heard Owen saying yesterday that he's tired of having like money changer friends because he's tired of like the pill pull, basically. And he said, he quoted verse 37 there, just let what you say simply be yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil.
Yes.
And that's because that's logos. Like, logos works like either it's true or it's false. Buddy, look me in the eye and tell me which one it is. But, you know, when you've got Yoram Hazony telling you, well, it's not that simple, right? Like, it's one way for this sect and another way for this sect, and I can't say yes or no. Like, okay, devil, but like away from me, you know? I think that's probably
I mean, you can see it too when you ask when you ask, especially like the Jews, you ask them questions and they keep on like fucking just rattling off with their high IQ, and they won't just answer the fucking question. It's like, Matthew, what is it, 5:37? Let what you say simply be yes or no. Anything more than that comes from evil. Like, it's yes or no.
This is why, like, at one level, the Jewish Gentile distinction must be understood, because it took me years to get this, because you're a Gentile, you grow up in Gentile world, and all the Gentiles they think in logical consistency. They may not be great at it, but even the dumb ones have a sense that, like, if we say X is true, that means it's true in Beijing as well as in New York. Whereas Jews don't think like that. They have a whole thing about us and them, and so it's like, I can never say true or false because there's no such thing as true or false. Like, it's basically true for us means false for them, and vice versa. And that's, that to
36 books where like, they have 36 books basically to teach how to beat around the question. But Jesus is like, fuck you guys, yes or no. That's it. Like, yes or no.
Right.
Stop it.
And so, like, and it's almost like you could instruct a child where you go, like, listen, if anybody ever starts giving you the runaround, just tune out, like, because they're not being honest at that point, you know? And like, I don't know.
Well, that's how you can also tell a liar, right? Like, because usually, and I notice it with kids, like, as soon as you start hearing, like, you ask them a question and then they won't give you like a direct answer. They keep beating around the bush. You're just like, all right, you're lying. And if it was a simple, like, I've learned this even like kind of growing up and knowing people, but you can always tell a liar because they just won't shut the fuck up. Like, they keep rambling on, and somebody that's going to tell the truth is going to keep it short and sweet. At least that's from like my perspective.
Okay. Next.
They want your shoulder.
Yeah, no. Let's see.
Why that's so funny.
You have heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Like basically turn the other cheek. Give him your cloak as well as your shirt. Go the extra mile. I don't know. Some of this seems like self-help to me.
Well, I think it's also like
it.
kind of like
clean your
don't
bedroom.
let them get you down. Like, don't fucking back down. That's what I see it as. Like, turn the other cheek.
True. I mean,
in a way,
Owen was saying yesterday, do forgive them. Keep forgiving them, because like if you go vengeance, then they'll, they'll use that against you, and like that does seem probably true, I guess. Although it gets tiresome, like to have to always forgive the treachery,
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard to do, isn't it? Like the whole forgiveness thing in general.
Because like it's at some point you realize they were overrepresented in participating in subverting our culture. And it's like, that does make you mad, But anyway, okay, so love your enemies. I guess that's the same thing. I do like the verse at the end, or 47.
47. Yeah. I was getting ready to read that one, because this is like, this is what I want to tell the people of Israel. And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You, therefore, must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect.
Right. I hope Jesus is being kind of sarcastic here in his invocation of the Gentiles, but maybe he's not. I mean, sometimes you get the sense, like in that Syro-Phoenician woman story, that he has a kind of condescending attitude about Gentiles. And but maybe he just knows his audience, and he's like, he's talking to the Jews, and he goes, even the crappy Gentiles love fellow Gentiles.
Mm-hmm.
But we Jews, we have to love all people. And like, this just cracks me up, because of course
they don't.
It's exactly the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so like, anyway, his attitude here seems to be closer to a Gentile attitude, even if he doesn't know it.
Well, this is also something that last time I had Kenny on my stream, this is something that he brought up and basically said, well, you should follow the rules because, look at Matthew, which one is it? 48. So you must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Like, no. You're like misinterpreting that.
He is misinterpreting, because like what Jesus is saying there, no Jewish rabbi would have said at the time. They didn't talk about how you have to love everyone equally. They talked about how you have to, like Leviticus 19:18, love your neighbor to them means love your fellow Jew. That's exactly what they would have said about that. And so for Jesus to say, no, you have to do better than that, was like a departure. That's what it was weird. Otherwise, why were people listening to him? He was saying unusual things given the context. I mean, I guess that's my take on it. Okay, Matthew 6.
Oh, I love, like, all of Matthew 6 basically just like BTFOs the Jews and calls them out on their boasting, boasting tendencies. And you can always tell, like, that's always interesting. And I guess everybody's kind of guilty of boasting here and there, but Jews specifically love to boast about their morality. And it's funny because like when Ben Shapiro's like, I've never said the N-word. Like, just say the fucking word, Ben. Nigger. Like, it kind of pisses me off. Like, he's so righteous and moral that he never says nigger.
Yeah, he wins the award.
Yes.
Congratulations, Ben Shapiro. I mean, I think that is, but like that is, sadly, probably that is how worldly authority is established. I was thinking about how, like, remember in like the 90s is when they started asking, I guess it was Bill Clinton first, have you ever tried marijuana? And he famously said, I tried it, but never inhaled. Like, that was his answer. It was the most Jewish Pharisaical answer. It was like on a technicality, he was off the hook. But then, like, you notice that, like, since then, there's been this, like, George Bush and Obama were like, yeah, and I did cocaine too. And whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was thinking,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
they
yeah.
should. I hope that pretty soon they will start asking, like, future presidents, like, did you ever look at pornography, or did you ever send a sext message or whatever? And I mean, basically, you're going to find that no one is able to, like, honestly pass this moral standard,
Well, why are these questions even being asked?
Right, because they're law keeping, like gatekeeping, legalist, policing questions. Because basically, at the end of the day, what they want is only Ben Shapiro to be able to be president.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be some tiny little nerd who, like, who's like, how Judas shows up in the chat and he's always like, you got to make sure you've got a filter on your computers, or else, like, your eyes will be corrupted and stuff. And it's like, yeah, I mean, probably they will, because at some point, even if you have the filter on your computer, you're going to go to school and someone's going to show you something on their phone, and then you've looked at something bad, and now you're a sinner too. And the point is, like, that's the point. Everybody's a sinner, so no one's qualified to be president or to lead us or to have opinions.
Yeah, Eke just said it perfectly in the chat. Spirit of the law versus letter of the law.
Right.
The spirit of the law has to win.
Yeah.
You get it, Eke. He gets it.
Yeah, that's right. So then, so that's what they do, right? Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people, in order to be seen by them. For then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. This is where, like, you have your like,
box, and it's like, hey, look at me, I got my money. It's going to the donation box.
Or
everybody,
all
great.
of the big donating elites at Harvard and Yale, they want to get, like, a building named after them, or a scholarship named after them. It's like, aren't I generous? So that's that.
A little statue, maybe a park bench.
But basically, you should do it in secret. And the same goes for when you pray. I love when you pray. Don't be like the hypocrites. And this, I have to say, this, like, just blows up institutional church to me. It's like, this is what we all do. Even Christians who go to church go like the hypocrites. When you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites. They love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you pray, you're different. Like, don't get all dressed up in your fancy Easter Sunday best and go pray in front of everybody. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Like, that's a whole different way of thinking about prayer. Yeah.
And it is interesting, isn't it? And well, no, because I think about going to church, and it's like everybody goes there and gets all dressed up and fancy, and it's like, what are we really doing here?
Yeah.
Like, what is the purpose of this in a kind of a weird way? And it's weird I'm even saying this now, because I was all like, yeah, gung-ho about church. And now I'm seeing that it's just part of the empire, like everything else. Church. And
even saying going to church is an extremely, I think, unchurch thing, because it's like, basically, we're supposed to be living in church, like, as much as possible. Like, it's this thing, like, the church was the body of Christ. It was the Christians. Like, it didn't need a building. It didn't need an hour. Like, imagine an hour, like, once a week, you're going to go to church. And then the rest of the week you live in empire, just like all the other empire dwellers,
Yeah.
And like, that's not the way to do this. We're talking about, like, checking out.
And plus, it's not real, right? Because when you go in and you're in front of, but I don't think it's real, because when you see people in church, especially if you have a church with, like, a lot of people in it, you're not going around. It's basically small talk, like, nobody's saying, like, man, I had a shitty fucking week, like, nobody's being honest like that. So it's all like, hi, how are you? Like, I'm good. How are you? It's like small talk, and nothing can get past that, honestly, you know?
And they're all dressed like it's business, casual.
Like, not gonna lie, I do my hair, I do my makeup, I'll put on, like, nice
and it's
thing.
because
It's like,
you don't,
why am I doing that?
Like, if you didn't do that, they would be like, what is, it's like, it would puncture the whole thing. Like, this all depends on everyone. I mean, it's very much like professionalism has taken over at church. And I just don't think that's what was intended by.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And I think
early church.
what's really lacking is just a sense of honesty.
Yeah.
How can you be honest when everybody is dressed up kind of fake? Like, I guarantee you, hell, when I come home, I'm like, look, wear my t-shirt, wear my
Right.
shorts, and like I'm being comfortable again, put on my bedroom slippers or something, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody else does that too. So we go to church with a facade on in general,
Yes.
and then what comes out of our mouth is also kind of like, it's not really reality. And that's what's missing from a church. Is like, how can you build a community with just small talk and no realness?
Right. And or in just 1 hour a week. Like that's also completely wrong, right? It's supposed to be like a community has to be all day, every day. Like that's what it is,
Mhm.
you know?
What's the verse? Matthew 18:20. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name,
That's
there
church.
I am among them.
In
Like,
other words, like welcome to church. We're in
yes,
it.
yes.
Yeah.
I know you
Yeah.
fucking get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get it. Like sitting around a campfire, just
Yeah.
shooting the shit with each other, but doing it in like a Christian way, you know?
Yeah.
And then like hell, if you pray together in the end and you fucking mean it because you know you're with real people, you know
Right.
you're all suffering the same way. Like that. And I agree with Jordan Peterson in the sense, like, yeah, life kind of is suffering, you know? And there's all different ways we can suffer mentally, physically. But it's like that feeling like, hey, we all have the spirit in us if we just like open our hearts to it, you know? And then you do it together and mean it. That's way more meaningful to me than going to some fucking church and then, you know. And it's like,
I mean, how many people do you have in your real life? Like it's extremely rare and difficult to
I
find
have
this.
like 0 people in my life
Right.
that I could do this with. Like even
Yeah.
my pastor, you know, I go over with him and I can have a good conversation with him, but I don't cuss around him. It's
Yeah.
like, why
That's
not?
yeah.
You know, it's kind of strange.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Okay, so then I like the part about how to pray too. It says, "Don't heap up empty phrases, as the Gentiles do." I mean, interestingly, both. I mean, like the Jews do too, right? I mean, you go to a Jewish synagogue, there's somebody up there heaping up empty phrases, then it goes on for an hour and a half or something. And this is like this is kind of a big thought because it's like the Christians do this. They have the little program printed out and there's like a prayer in it that everybody reads together.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
kind of like you're half consciously saying a bunch of words and they're empty words. But Jesus, I have this theory that his prayer here, the very famous Our Father prayer,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you got to imagine, like, you know how like people in their heads always imagine Jesus speaking like Shakespearean English? Like they imagine like he has like an elevated register because we all read or like you memorized this prayer in the King James version, Our Father
Mm-hmm.
which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. The
Yeah.
problem is that like like in the context of this, he basically is saying, listen, people, like don't do that. Don't be a Shakespearean actor. Don't
Mm-hmm.
like conjure up big fancy words. No, just say. And he goes, pray like this, and this
It's simple.
it's simple.
It's
the
so
basic
simple.
translation of this would be like, basically, guys, just say God in heaven. Your name is important. Like, I hope your kingdom comes. Do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Make
Mm-hmm.
earth like heaven. Feed us and keep us away from the Satan. And that's it. Amen.
Listen
that's the prayer.
how gay is this shit? And so like the church I go to, they'll have prayers that are like 5 minutes long, man.
Mhm.
At that point, I've totally tuned out. Like,
Right.
and then you have like the guy on the keyboard playing like a soft little tune to go along with the prayer that he's saying. And it's like what what is this? It's like it's just so strange to me.
Right.
And I'm not trying to boast. I'm just giving you an example of like what I do. Like when I do my prayer at night, I say the entire Lord's Prayer, but before I say amen, I'll mention other people's names that I want to like say a prayer for and whatnot, and then that's it. But it's weird because I feel like the more I say the Lord's Prayer, I feel like it resonates more and more and more. I can feel it, man. You know, like I can.
Well, that's the point. Is like below the words, there's an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is the prayer. Like the words themselves are kind of the vehicle to get that idea into you. But once you've got the idea, you could almost do it non-verbally, I think is the point, right?
Yeah.
Like it's really just it's a plea and gratitude kind of just like thought or felt or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Okay, then if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But which is interesting. I mean, I have to
Which
say,
goes
like,
back to
people,
anger, right? In
yeah,
chapter 5, like
and like
forgive
judging us,
them.
all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. Then, of
yeah,
course, drop down, it starts talking about fasting in verse 16. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. So, hey, look at me. I'm starving myself. And I just want to show you guys I'm fasting for God.
right,
Aren't I morally righteous?
right,
Like, no, you're just a fucking retard.
yeah.
um,
Well, you know, it's kind of different too than like the whole. Now, I know this is in the context of like talking to Jews. I'm just thinking out loud here. I haven't thought this thought through, but like in a way, kosher eating is already a kind of fasting. Like
mhm.
you're setting yourself apart.
Like
Um,
vegans.
yeah, like vegans or like, you know, anybody who's got like a special diet. It's like,
Yeah.
which I do too, but I feel it like I don't like it when I hang out with other people because it sets me apart. I feel like I
Yeah.
have to
Same here.
apologize.
Mhm.
I'm like, sorry, I guess I'll like try to choke down whatever I'm not supposed to be eating at
Yeah,
the
like a
house.
piece of chicken or
Yeah,
something. Like
yeah,
give me something with no bread or sugar,
yeah, yeah,
basically.
exactly.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
yeah, let's see. And then
Like,
your treasures. Uh,
do not lay up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That that kind of takes it out of the material realm and puts it into the spiritual realm when you do that, which I think is that's huge, man. Like it has to stay in the spirit, like keep in step with the spirit. Go straight back to Galatians, which I love, by the way.
I've been thinking so much about how hard this is to do because the merchants will dangle every temptation, every material thing they could possibly get you hooked on, and for cheap. Like they'll, you know, it'll be like, here's a good deal, and you know, man, by the time you're just 30 years old, like you're a rare person if your eyes haven't gotten distracted by some treasure on earth, you know?
Right.
So it's like
Hmm.
that next section that goes, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. I mean, this means like, this is metaphorical, right? It's like your eye is the organ of your focus. So it's like whatever you focus on, if that's a healthy thing, then your whole body will be full of light and things will be good. But if you start focusing on darkness or worldly stuff or whatever, you'll be dragged down. And then the next section makes even more sense. No one can serve two masters. So you cannot serve God and money. And like, fuck. I mean, who doesn't serve money? Like, this is
Well,
state
that's a whole
enforced
thing, right?
religion.
Like
Yeah.
that is literally what is happening with our society.
Yeah.
It's straight up empire, and empire breeds like usury and materialism and mammon worship. That's all
Yes.
it is, you know?
Yes.
So like
Yeah.
we're all in a diaspora. Get out of our small town. Let's go to the big cities. Let's
See,
worship money in the high-rise towers we should be living in.
I told you that story one time about when Antiochus, the Greek king, tried to set up statues of Zeus in every temple in the kingdom, and only the Jews managed to resist. They fought like a civil war over it when Judas Maccabee was like, no, you know, we won't let you set up that statue of Zeus in our temple. And it's like, that's pretty based. That's actually what we need, because in every temple in America, you basically have to worship Mammon first. I mean, that's what, even like when they pass around that, it's almost impossible to get away from it. Like, you know, if you want to start your runaway pig farm, you have to buy it with money, and then you have to pay taxes with money. And like, money is just, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. It is frustrating because once you're dealing with money, you're so easily subverted or dragged around by the nose or whatever.
Yeah. Well, you like, I don't know. I think with money worship, mammon worship in general, you lose sight of what's actually important. And that's, you know, family and what's
Yeah, or
I don't know. You like you trying to escape from logos, right? Like money is anti-logos.
Yeah, you'll be compromised by it. You know, like you'll go like,
Right,
oh,
right.
like I remember when I got a job, which was I did for money. It like I was kind of like, oh, like man, I'm gonna have to see my family less, but I guess that's reality, so I'll just do it, and then we can pay our bills. But it's like that's a compromise. That's kind of a you know, it cuts you kind of down at the knees or something.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, do not be anxious.
Therefore, I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? So basically, like, don't be a fucking materialist.
Well, right. This is where like I mean this section is really hard because it's like I actually read this to my students most semesters, right? Because every college student is in college now precisely because they're worried about their life, about what they will eat and what they will drink, about what they will wear, about what they will eat, you know, that, and it's like you want to say to them, like, don't do that. I mean, you're saying you're a Christian, but you're planning for your 401k and stuff. But he says it again in verse 31, therefore do not be anxious saying, what shall we eat or what shall we drink? And I always quote this to them because as soon as I say like, don't be concerned about the future, they go, but man, we have to like rent an apartment and eat food. I mean, we need a job. And I go, well, that's not what Jesus said, right? He said, do not be anxious saying, what shall we eat or what shall we drink or what shall we wear? For the Gentiles, the fucking Gentiles seek after all these things.
Yeah, I guarantee you, we hold a pork barbecue. Jesus is coming.
Yeah.
He's coming to eat it. Yeah.
And your heavenly Father knows that you need all of them. So seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and these things will be added to you. Which I guess does, I mean, it sort of means like, you know, you won't go hungry, but don't think about it all the time. Like I get the distinction. It is a little hard, it's a little subtle, but yeah.
Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble.
Yeah.
I like that one. Just fucking live, man. Like, stop trying to follow rules. Just live. Judging others. Oh, this is such a good one. Judging others. Do you know anybody more judgmental than Jews?
No, they want to judge the world. They want to literally be the world's judges. They're like 44% of our Supreme Court, and they're setting up.
Welcome to the gay disco.
Yeah, I'll be right back. I gotta pee, but you read this section.
Yeah. All right, so Matthew 7, I'm in verse 1. Judge not, that you not be judged, or be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Like, oh, I freaking love that. I love that. That's so like hypocritical. And for anybody to like judge, like the whole thing about judging, like seriously, who is more judgmental than the Jews? Because you got to think they hold that morality position to where, you know, like it's like a competition for them. And that's like Ben Shapiro. I've never said the N-word. Like, I just want to, if I ever met him, I'd be like, hello, Ben, nigger. Just say it to him. I just said if I ever met Ben Shapiro, I would walk up and just say the word nigger, right? Just look him dead in the eye and be like, nigger. Like, watch him just squirm.
Wow, that's what if you like? I do love how yeah, this is a kind of example of like last night on Vivian's show, I was talking about law keeping and how, and like it seemed like the chat was yelling at you and Chris Alton about this, like, and they were all saying, you know, we need the law, and it's like,
well, who needs the law? So like,
yeah, kind of, but like what they want with the law is the judgment that it allows, and so as soon as somebody says nigger, it's like basically you can feel people running to the party to go like, you know, like, oh,
isn't that crazy?
He just said it. He
just said the bad word.
It's like I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a lot of power sort of conferred in thinking in these terms of like sin and judgment, and people aren't good enough by their nature to not deploy like judgment as power. And so this is part of what Jesus is trying to say, is which is like basically, well, here, did you read this yet? First, take the log out of your own eye.
Yeah,
and then you'll see clearly. So it's like, I mean, these people like the leftists love to run around. The contemporary like left loves to run around and go like, racist. That's racist. But it's like, okay, are you sinless enough to accuse me of racism?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they believe they are, but from my perspective, they often aren't.
Boy, they followed the laws.
Right. Yeah.
You pathetic Gentile. Don't you know that?
Yeah.
What else here? Do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. Oof. Damn, that's kind of dark, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. You can think of him there as talking about Gentiles, but better, I think you can think about him talking about like the completely unwoke, the people who don't get it. And basically he's giving you permission here to not, basically to know your audience. Like you got to speak the truth at some level, but when it comes to like really like red pilling or preaching the gospel or whatever, you don't have to try to like there's dogs out there. There's people who are consuming and they're just eating, chips and watching Bravo and like, fuck those people. Like you don't have to give them your pearls,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What else? Ask and it will be given. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks it will be opened. I don't know. Like this was a hard one to translate. So I can't even, sometimes like I'm thinking in my head like a black person's. Every time I see ask, it's like I want to say axe.
I think in my head like a black person.
Only when I see things like when I see words like ask or axe.
Yeah.
I keep saying like axe. You may not ask me a question.
That's not very based. Unless does your family from Appalachia say that? Or?
No.
Yeah, you should.
Appalachians, we say ask. Yeah. We throw our accent up on there. But I just think because it's like funny to me. I have an alter ego I used to do back when I had Snapchat called Uncle Leroy.
Sounds politically correct and safe.
Oh, it was great. I wish I could actually do it on here. Like, I'm Uncle Leroy. What up, my niggas? I'm like I'm a black man from Mississippi, and my wife's name is Bernice.
Wow, it sounds kind of kinky, actually.
I don't know. I just haven't done that on the streams yet. I don't know if y'all people ready.
Yeah, save your pearls.
Y'all niggas ain't ready. Okay, so the golden rule. This is okay. So
wait. I just wanted to say one more thing about asking it will be given. That whole section. It is kind of woo-woo, like meaning this is like, I think this would have been quoted in that book that everybody bought in 2010, The Secret, where it's like it's almost magic, like it's supernatural, like just basically pray to Jesus and you can have whatever you want. And like Oprah takes this to mean just picture piles of money in your hands and you can have it, But I actually think like you have to kind of make sure that what you're asking for is the will of God, then you can have it,
Yeah. Like,
so
I don't think God, it's like Joel Osteen,
that's what I meant to say.
We should be rich. Like, fuck you mammoth worshiper. Like, you are not real. That shit drives me crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
You should just start. All right. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law of the prophets. But enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction. And those who enter by it are many, for the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life. And those who find it are few. That's like
not very many.
Yeah. No, because it's not easy for people to do. Like, who can give up their materialism? Like, this is like it's the I love when you talk about Dante's Inferno, like all the pits of hell, like all these layers, and it's the mammon worship. It's right there at the bottom,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
few people are going to get it. Very, very few people are going to get it. Do you know anybody in your life that's like that? Like, do you know anybody that's a sackcloth person?
Uh, I know a couple. I have a few colleagues that appear to be sackcloth people, and it's interesting. I'll like look at them, and they look at me, and it's like, are we recognizing that in each other? Like, meaning they have really, like, they'll be wearing 10-year-old canvas pants and like an untucked
Yeah.
shirt, and they barely shave ever. And it may be that they just don't know personal hygiene, but it might also be that they're making a statement, and I kind of like it like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, this idea about the few, I mean, it does beg the question about, like, the early church was a breakaway, like, dropout thing from empire, but then it did transition and became the empire, and it became Christendom. So, like, basically everybody in the Holy Roman Empire thought they were saved, and, like, I guess the Catholic Church kind of taught that they were, or like, and I think that is sort of a corruption of what's going on here. I do think it's a rare thing. I think what Jesus says to Nicodemus later is true, where he says you have to be born again. And, like, there's that whole thing where it's like, what does that mean? It's like, well, it means, like, you have to, like, kill the old self and start again. And that's a rare, like, people don't all do that. And it's not as simple as, like, oh, getting baptized at your church when you're 13. No, I mean, it's like, it's a really profound psychological thing, I think. And I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't even know that. I mean, like, at least maybe this is the Puritan in me that's always like, I don't know that I have it, to be honest. Like, I hope I do, but maybe I'm not even one of the elect or one of the chosen or one of the saved.
I don't know. I feel kind of saved. I was an atheist since I was 10. And then all of a sudden, after I turned 29, I found Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. But, like, that's a different kind of finding Jesus than the kind where you're almost, like, born into it and you take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good sign, I think. That's kind of what.
And I'm not really speaking for myself, I guess, but I'm not even saying like I'm some prophet or some higher being or whatever, but it's I feel like some of the best Christians are actually the ones that went through some shit in their life, that have actually lived life.
Yeah.
And had experiences, because the whole idea is like you have to die in your sins, right? You have to, in order to be reborn. Otherwise you just stay
once born. I love the idea of once born or twice born. Like, there's that William James talks about it as the second floor of the house. Like, that's what this, like, death and rebirth in the spirit is supposed to be. And, like, institutional religions can't do this for you. So this is the thing I was trying to communicate to Vivian last night. Like, it's a real thing. It's a real, actual thing. Like, there's not, you can't institutionalize it because the institution can't rebirth your spirit for you. It's not as simple as just, like, do these rites and eat the Eucharist and have the priest bless you and then you're reborn. It's like, no, I mean, there is a thing that happens to people, and you can read about it in some of the lives of the saints or some of the people who've, like, or like Paul, when Paul describes it in where is it, in Acts, like, wherever, or
when he
chapter 9, I think, in Acts.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get it. Okay, so beware the false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. I love that. I mean, this is everyone, by the way, lately. I just feel like inundated with wolves dressed up like sheep telling me they're here to save me, like Yoram Hazoni.
Wolves dressed like
yeah. Jews dressed like Gentiles, you will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree does not bear good fruit, is cut down and thrown into the fire. You will recognize them by their fruits. I wanted to say one thing about this, which is a little bit aside, but I love how immersed in natural analogies Jesus is.
Mm-hmm.
He, like, literally nature is the source of almost all of his parables. And like what I heard you talking about something yesterday with Eki before I came on, you were talking about growing up, and there was some, like, you were using one of those analogies of like there was like a worm in a something that when it died would crawl out of the, like,
Oh, the warvels from the squirrel.
yeah, like those sorts of things are like amazing ready-made parables. Like, and so they're like, once they just
like, the animal's dead, they just crawl out. Oh, it's not useful anymore. Let's just move on.
Wow, that sounds interesting and familiar, doesn't it? But like the thing is about that is that notice how, like, we are being put into concentration camps, boxes, electricity, and there's no nature, and so there are no warvels to observe for most young people, and so they can't think like this. The point is that you have to first have access to, like, unprocessed nature so that you can observe it and see it. And then if you grew up on a farm in Virginia, you can now all of a sudden you have just this whole treasure trove of, like, teachings. You didn't realize they were teachings when you were living them, but as a grown-up who has some understanding now, all of a sudden they translate themselves, and you're like, oh my God, the warvel is a ready-made parable, and this is what Jesus had. And I just think it's a really helpful thing to do, and it's why you should raise kids in the woods as much as possible.
Yeah.
It's logos.
Nature's logos. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Abso-freaking-lutely. And then this one's always interesting too. The I never knew you. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do mighty works in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart me, you workers of lawlessness.
Yeah.
Fucking Jews. Depart from me, Jews.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, do you have anything to say on that one?
No, I mean, I think, like, it's interesting, like, the workers, like, that's an interesting phrase, the workers of lawlessness.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I go back and forth because, like, I don't think there's a strain of, like, reactionary thinking in America that wants fascism and, like, autocracy. Like, they want the strong man to take over and tell us what all the rules should be. Mm-hmm. And even, like, down to, like, you know, I don't know, like, what television should produce and how much things should cost and what you should be able to buy and not buy and stuff. And then I usually will show up kind of libertarian and go, like, no, we don't need all that. Like, I actually do like the idea that people have to make these choices themselves. But I know that leaves me open to, first of all, like, probably, I mean, you know, it's like it's easy to subvert that, I guess, because you can dangle very enticing things in front of people to distract them, you know, pornography, etc. Mm-hmm. But it's also like, people, like, the Jewish law-keeping mind will also show up and say to me, like, kind of what they were saying to you in the chat last night and me when I was talking to Vivian, and I was sort of saying, you know, we're free from the law. Like, that's what it says over and over again. We aren't beholden to the law. Mm-hmm. Stop trying to put a yoke of slavery on the Gentiles' necks that we and our grandfathers couldn't bear. Like, there's a tendency for people to show up and go, oh, so you're just an anarchist hedonist, you know? And no, like, it's actually very subtle. Like, so I say that because, yeah, I mean, maybe Jesus, like, or not Jesus, I hope, but someone could have, like, accused me of being a worker of lawlessness because I'm saying the law isn't the way to salvation or righteousness. But I don't really think that, because I think, like, if you have faith, if you have the faith of, like, Abraham or Jesus, and you understand that, like, that's the basis for not justification but, like, righteousness, and that justification comes by grace or faith. Mm-hmm. Like, then I think your works will begin to correct themselves almost. Like, it's effortless. Yeah. It's mm-hmm. not a thing where you're, like, white knuckling to be good all the time. That's like the wrong attitude. But this is hard for people to understand because they're like, oh, so I can just go do whatever I want. No, that's not what I said. But there's a subtle and kind of sophisticated middle ground that's like psychologically interesting and profound that it's hard to articulate.
Yeah. And somebody, I think it was somebody made an account Ash's shoulders. Jesus Christ. That's really funny. But they said that there were like 500 moms that were protesting the trannies reading in the libraries. Like for one, that's awesome. But the thing is, apparently like is that not allowed? Like we can't protest these fucking weirdos reading to children.
Oh, right.
And like that's the whole thing, right? And that's where I'm so like stuck on the natural law of basically being human, because I see that shit and my red flags are like dinging like crazy, and I'm just like, no, I would definitely be that mother out there protesting.
And notice, like, there's not even a specific law in Christianity or Judaism that says like trannies shouldn't read at the local library. It's that you have the bell in your head that goes,
well, it's coming. That's the thing, though. You know? That's yeah. Everybody like, for at least I hope a lot of people have it that has that reaction. But the thing is, it's the legislation to where you're not even allowed to discriminate. So you have to put up with this shit. You know.
Well, you can not go. I mean, I don't know.
Discrimination laws that's fake and gay. That's like one of the worst.
I don't know. I'm like so on the fence about it because I know that my position. First of all, okay, I don't think it's a lot of people. I think it's few, just like Jesus said. Yeah. But the few who have faith do have the law written on their hearts, and they will know immediately not to take their kids to the transsexual reading hour at the public library. So in a way, if you have faith, you will be like inoculated against globo homo. But I also know that my perspective on all of this, it leaves me open to the charge that I'm basically too weak and that like the pause is going to take over. But I mean, I don't know what to say about that. Like it already has, you know? And yeah. I just, I don't think like, the problem is the only solution to that is to say we need a full theocracy with like a, you know, Holy Roman Emperor with the iron crown of Lombardy on his head to tell us what all the rules are. And I don't want to live in a theocracy for the same reason that Jesus didn't, you know?
Right. Like, well, this is why I honestly, I'm still libertarian on this is, it's like my constitution, but they had it right to begin with. The whole thing just got subverted and, you know, turned into some gay disco nonsense. But I think it like, as long as you have some type of thing where we all have our God-given rights, either to speak for one, and then to own weapons, absolutely. And then everything else is just keep it small. You know, like there should not be national laws against discrimination. Like I think that's horse shit, you know?
It's funny, like I maybe
be able to manage it better. We don't need like an emperor because eventually, like for how long do we need like a fascist dictator, basically? You know, like, and you better hope that they're not going to turn into murderous, you know, and crazy.
People will say like, oh, well, if you don't do that, then you end up with the proliferating number of sects and factions and everybody ends up worshiping a different God and you don't have a unified like sovereign state. And I think that's possible, but it's like if the only way to generate a unified like sovereign state is to basically like force the peasants to believe the same things. I mean, that's not any better. Then you just have a slave state. And like, honestly, to me, the slavery of the mind is almost worse than slavery of the body. If I don't have a set, I don't know, but like, I understand too, that if you give people the freedom of religion at that level, it'll spiral out into a lot, like basically polytheism. So I don't have this solved yet.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do. I mean, but I do think if you keep it small, and give everybody kind of in the community a job to do. And this is also where it's hard because we're not really homogenous and like the whole birds of a feather flock together type thing. It's people start to self-segregate. And then, I don't know, it's hard to keep a society kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, under control unless you do have some law. Like I get that. But then at what point is it's just too much? And then next thing you know, we're the Judan and we need another savior. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think, it just has to stay small. Give somebody, like, have a small but functioning community or like a town or something, and then as soon as you kind of fuck up, it's not really that there's going to be a law, but it's this feeling of shame that you could get from your neighbors.
Yeah.
Which shame for me is horrible. So if you're in a community and there's just say there's no law law against say burglary or something, and if there isn't, people are still going to rob, but the way that the people react to this thief is going to be telling, like you'll probably be cast out. So you're not going to be part of that community anymore. So now you're like a wandering Jew in the desert again. Like I think communities can kind of work this out themselves. Like we don't, I mean, I don't know. Do you like the neighbor fucks up? Like you got to call the police. Yeah,
right. I totally agree.
Maybe,
like
I don't know, man.
We don't need laws on a scale of 330 million people. And a
Right,
lot of people have been saying like, oh, let's retake America and stuff. It's like, no, I don't even want us. There's no us that's 330 million people. I don't even want to run an empire. Like I don't want, that's too big. What you want are just what you said, like little regions, little like city states almost, where the people themselves are in charge. And that like, so you kind of vaguely see the path from where we are now to where we want to get as being one of like dissolution and breaking apart and reduce, like basically just, I don't know, like accelerate until the big empire falls so that we can start again on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
But
like, did you hear what I was talking about the Hutterites?
Yeah.
Yesterday on Eke Stream, but they have a really interesting setup. Like they do have a council. So, I mean, there is like there are judges in this little community. And so, I mean, I don't know, like I don't know. So what happens if like you have somebody that's accused? Well, it goes right back to Sermon on the Mount, right? Like have people work things out before bringing it to the altar.
That's exactly what I think he means in the next section where you build your house on the rock. Yes. The rock being the church.
Foundation.
The church being that sense of community. Like us.
The center.
It's us.
Yes.
So everyone
you fucking get it.
I know, I do. I really do. I feel like I'm seeing the Matrix, and like it's also frustrating because I'm looking out my window at my neighborhood of 600 homes where I don't really know anybody. I mean, I kind of vaguely, like I know 10 families, but it's like, can I trust them? Because even when I like meet with them at the 4th of July party or the pool, it's sort of like what you were saying about church. Like we never get past the professionalism. It's like, hello.
You're not going up to them being like, you know about the Jews?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Like, you almost have to do that. You almost have to pierce the veil or rip the veil of the temple and get in there with people.
Which is hard to do because we live in such like an Orwellian dystopia. Who the fuck can you trust to go up and like start talking normal shit without them thinking like you're crazy? You said nigger?
Right, or turn you in, they'll turn you in, or they'll exile you. So everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell and the floods came and the wind beat and blew against that house and it fell, and great was the fall of it.
It's like the 3 Little Pigs story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of. And then it was repeated in Luke. Like I like the Luke, the chapter in Luke. I think it was chapter 7. And I'm sorry, chapter 6 when it says build your house on the rock. It's like let me see here. I'm going to find where it says, he is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when the flood arose, the stream broke against that house and could not shake it because it had been well built. But the one who hears and does not do them is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. When the stream broke against it, immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great. So it's like, it's important. You have to have a strong foundation in something, like for sure. But I don't know. What do you think?
I think like there's been a terrible kind of violence done against people with this internationalism that has, I mean, the first form it took actually, even before immigration, was to dislocate communities. So they would like pull out factories and then towns became bummers and all the kids left. And so discontinuity arose. Like, so this is why, like, I grew up in Michigan, but now I'm in the South, and it's like I didn't really know anybody. It's hard to vibe with native Southerners who don't accept me quite as a local. And like, this is increasingly everyone's story. Like, everyone leaves home. And so the kind of foundation you're talking about, or Jesus is talking about, it's really hard to find and live, because they'll tell you, I mean, basically, like, I see these towns, like, I drive a lot, I drive places, and you see these towns and they're all dying. Like, there's no jobs there. And you could say, well, oh, it sounds like you want to worship mammon. And I'm like, no, I don't want to worship mammon, but like, there has to be something for people to do there. And like, mostly corporate entities have bought up the farmland, and those like fast food places have lined the one highway that drives through the city. And it's like, I don't know, it's just become hard for people to build those communities, the kind that would make you feel like shame and accountability.
Yeah. Well, everybody comes from a different area. Like, I come from a small town to where if you fucked up, then everybody's kind of going to know about it.
Yeah. But now you're not there anymore.
Yeah, I'm not there anymore.
And like, so you're kind of like, you have this like ghost of a conscience in you that, like, it's like you probably want it again, and you'd like your kids to have it, because that's the basis for like discerning the Holy Spirit almost. Like, it helps to have people who will call us out. But yeah, few of us do now. And when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching. I always love that word, astonished. I wish I knew what it was in the original, in the Greek, but of course, more in like, yeah, okay, in the Greek, I guess. And like, is it the right description? Because astonished is such a big word. Like, the crowd were astonished at his teaching. They're like, oh, they couldn't believe it. For he was teaching them as one who had authority, and not as their scribes. Which is
basically, it wasn't the little listen to me,
right.
Goyim.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Actually, because he wasn't even talking to the Goyim, it was listen to me, fellow Jews.
Yeah.
And there was that hierarchical thing, and Jesus wasn't in it. He wasn't a accredited Ivy League rabbi. He was some dude.
Like, Jesus, maybe he was just semi like a normie. Like, he didn't he didn't have the giant hats and the fancy robes, like the golden shrouds, and he was a sackcloth person.
He was a sackcloth person. And he was and Luke would call him a marginalized loser. And it's like that's because Luke would go like, well, have you published any peer-reviewed journal articles, Jesus? Like, do you have a wife and kids? Do you have a mortgage? Like,
do you have at least have a bachelor's degree?
Yeah. And so no, he didn't have any of that, but everyone recognized intuitively his own authority. And this is like,
well, he was speaking truth. Like, that's the thing. Yeah. Like, people are attracted to the truth. So that's what he was speaking. Like, speak the damn truth, you guys.
And people will always say like, they'll say like, but don't we need priests? Like, don't we need people to kind of like, know things that we can't all know and stuff? And it's actually a hard answer to say yes, but those priests will emerge organically, and you'll recognize them intuitively. And you can't substitute for that institutional accreditation. Priests are shamans. Like, they're real gurus of the world who understand better. Often it probably does arise from suffering or experience or something like that. And I think this is a different model, and it's one that's like, John Harris was talking last week about like horizontal power as opposed to vertical or hierarchical power. This is an example of that like, and by the way, this is how John the Baptist, had authority also, right? He also was nobody. He was not a priest technically, but he was out there doing priest things, and people recognized him as a priest, and that's why they showed up and wanted him to baptize. So I am moving in that direction of like kind of almost like egalitarian democratic spirituality, even while I know that people will say, well, that leaves you open to all kinds of subversion and and undermining and stuff. But that's what Jesus did, and he wasn't a fancy rabbi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but at the same time, like, I don't want trannies up in the public libraries reading, for story hour.
You know them right away as not the real rabbis.
Yeah, for sure.
I saw somebody post a picture of the latest 10-year-old tranny with makeup on and purple hair and like some costume. Ugh. And the tweet said something like, in nature, things with colors these bright are often poisonous. It just seems true. It's like you have, like, again, that natural instinct to just like recoil in horror.
Mm-hmm.
And see, I just like trust in that. I believe in that. I mean, I think it's interesting because like you can be fooled, but I'm rarely fooled. Like I mean,
yeah,
I usually have a pretty good sense about people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I mean, it's like there's the creepy person who's hunched and has that face that's like, and you just go like, this guy doesn't get it, But yeah, like clear-eyed, awake-faced people who are speaking the truth are pretty easy to recognize. They kind of ding like a bell usually.
Yeah, that's probably what Christ looked like when he came to get all the fishermen. Like, hey, and they saw it. They were like, this guy fucking gets it.
Right. Whereas imagine some hunchback Pharisee with his fancy robes and a big hat showing up and go like, follow me. They would have been like, fuck you, dude. I'm trying to work here and pay the bills. Like, it wouldn't have had the same thing. Yeah.
Well, you got to think like Christ had to look like everybody else too, like in order for them to, he was on the level. He was like on their level, and that's what was so amazing. And even with Paul, he understood the hardships of being a human, and Christ did too.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's what's amazing. That's amazing. What the Pharisees didn't do that Christ did was basically say, hey, like I'm God, but I'm also like human too. So I get and understand the human condition.
And then I have this research question I keep coming back to, and then I can never remember to do it and find the answer. But like I teach those Puritans who came to the New World, and they really did. They quoted the Book of Acts and the Book of Exodus all the time. They thought of themselves as like restarting the one true church, which is pretty fun and based, and it's interesting to think about. And they built farms, and they loved each other, and they tried to, do Christianity. And I've always wondered how long it was before they had to institute like police, because to me, police kind of indicates like the breakdown of what it really should be, which is in a real Christian community, you almost wouldn't need police because you would call each other out. Just the thing you were talking about, shame would help to police people. It would be small scale enough that we would all know each other. Like, I think, how in the New Testament there's like, this is the church of Corinth, this is the church of Thessalonica, and this is the church of Ephesus or Ephesus. Like, that would be that, like, this would be how it works. Basically, like, you would be in the church of Houston, and like people in Houston would show up at that thing, but that's it. Like, that's the kind of the edge of it. You might have like you might nominate a bishop or something, but not to like give law so much as just to go meet with like other communities and make sure everybody's staying on the same page, basically, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
I think we did it again.
Family, yeah, we did pretty good. Good job. Yeah, so we can, you have any last words? Before we
no, I still think like people should read Galatians and Ephesians between now and the next time we stream, and we can go over some of that stuff next time again, because it's been a while, and I just love it.
Galatians is lit.
Yeah,
for lack of a better term. No, but for real though, it's a great fucking book.
Yeah, let's plan on doing like we'll do at least we'll do Galatians 5 and Ephesians 2 and 3 at least, and then if there's right.
When do we start a church? I want to date.
I mean, we already did. Like, this is the church. Like, everybody bless you, go in peace. And
this is it, man. Like, all of us around the world.
Yeah. It is, what, I will say, like, we might need
we're not taking
handshakes. We need, like, secret handshakes, or just just say Galatians 5 to each other, because like I'm worried they're going to completely shut down the internet, and then it's like I've lost my church, you know, because of course they're going to do that, because it's the threat, because like here we are threatening a parallel civilization, you know, so be able to recognize each other.
Yeah. Well, this is a in the words of Matt, this is a Christian stream.
Yeah, that's right. This is a Christian stream, and a lot of irony and sarcasm were deployed, but
yeah. And we disavow any and all forms of violence. Don't advocate it. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, and and we just want. And by the way, my final word is: I just want Israel to practice less racism. So I hope they open their borders and let in the Africans mostly.
Amen.
All right, amen.
All right. Peace out, you guys.
See ya.